The sound of the waves reached her before the wind did, a low, endless hum rolling across the morning shore. Laura walked fast, as if movement could shield her from the memories hiding beneath that sound. Miami's sun glowed softly behind thin clouds, but she barely lifted her eyes to see it. Then she saw the group in the water, laughing, splashing, floating with effortless trust. Her heart tightened painfully, as if some old wound had suddenly remembered her name. She stopped walking without meaning to, her breath staggered by a pulse of panic. The instructor stood waist-deep, guiding adults through simple movements, calm as still water. Laura felt heat rising behind her ribs, a trembling she could neither control nor ignore. The ocean shimmered like a mirror she didn't want to face, holding truths she had buried at 17. Yet something inside her leaned forward, a small ache, a small question, a small beginning. A woman in the class slipped under for a moment and resurfaced laughing, wiping water from her eyes. The sight stabbed Laura with a mixture of envy and fear, a strange yearning she didn't recognize. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, as if gripping invisible railings for safety. The shoreline felt too close, the water too alive, the memories too loud to silence. She turned her face away, but the sound of laughter clung to her like salt. For years she had avoided this beach, choosing streets farther inland, routines far from the waves, but today something had pulled her here, though she would never admit it out loud. The ocean's scent, mineral, ancient, alive and settled, the stillness she carried inside. She felt like a glass jar someone had just shaken, old sediments rising from the bottom. Her breath broke again, not in fear alone, but in recognition. A memory flickered, water above her face, hands reaching, silence swallowing everything. The past pressed against her chest so sharply she almost stepped back onto the road. But her feet stayed rooted in the sand, as if the earth itself whispered for her to stay. Across the water, the instructor lifted a hand in greeting to someone behind her. But Laura felt, absurdly, as if he were waving at her. The idea unsettled her, yet also warmed something small and forgotten. For years she had been invisible, even to herself, fading beneath obligations and quiet routines. But here, one gesture, misdirected or not, had shaken the dust off her edges. She watched the class again, unable to pull herself fully away. The waves rolled in, patient, rhythmic, almost inviting. She took one step back, then one step forward, unable to decide which direction belonged to her. Her mind whispered to run, but her chest whispered to look just a little longer. Something unnamed was rising within her, as gentle as tide but as persistent. She didn't know what it meant, only that it wasn't leaving. And as she turned away, the ocean kept calling her name, soft but unmistakable. The next morning began like all the others. Quiet alarm, muted kitchen light, empty apartment air. Laura moved through her home in the same careful rhythm she had kept for years. Her husband had left 2 years earlier, the silence afterwards somehow heavier than his absence. Her children lived their own lives now, scattered across states she rarely visited. Every corner of her routine felt practiced, polished, and painfully hollow. She made her coffee the same way she always had, pouring it into a mug chipped at the rim. The smell filled the kitchen, warm but strangely distant, like someone else's memory. She stood at the counter longer than she needed to, unwilling to start the day. Her hands tightened around the mug as if holding something together inside her. Outside, Miami buzzed with life she no longer felt part of. At work, she smiled the polite smile people expected, a soft shape with no real weight. Coworkers passed by with greetings she answered automatically, her voice steady but empty. No one noticed the exhaustion behind her eyes, and she never offered it. She completed tasks efficiently, invisibly, the way she did everything. The hours slipped by without touching her. During lunch, she sat alone at a small table near the window, watching cars pass below. She felt like she was floating outside her own body, watching a life she didn't recognize. The memory of the ocean flickered again, sharp and uninvited. She swallowed hard, unsure why it lingered when she had spent decades avoiding it. Something inside her trembled at the thought, as if waking. When she returned home, the apartment greeted her with the same unmoving quiet. She hung her bag on the same hook, placed her keys in the same bowl. Routine had become a shelter, but also a cage she no longer fit inside. She sat on the couch, staring at nothing, feeling the day echo inside her. Her chest tightened with a loneliness too old to name. She thought of the people in the water, their laughter, their trust in the waves. The image felt foreign, almost impossible, yet painfully beautiful. She wondered when she had last felt anything with that kind of freedom. The question struck her hard, leaving her breath uneven, her throat thick. It was a question she couldn't ignore anymore. That night, as she lay in bed, the sound of imagined waves filled the darkness. She pressed a hand to her chest, startled by how alive the memory felt. Something had shifted in her yesterday, small but undeniable. She didn't yet know what it asked of her, only that it refused to fade. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep feeling something moving inside her. The dream came without warning, water swirling above her, sunlight fractured into shards. Her younger self gasped, reaching for air that wasn't there, fear swallowing her whole. Laura woke with a cry trapped in her throat, her body damp with cold sweat. She clutched the sheets, panting, as if the ocean had followed her into the room. The past felt closer than it had in decades. She sat up slowly, running trembling fingers through her hair. The memory was clearer than it had ever been, sharp as broken glass. She remembered the pull downward, the helplessness, the certainty she would not rise. For years she had buried it under responsibilities, kindness, and silence, but now it pushed upward like a wave refusing to be ignored. All morning, the memory chased her, hiding behind ordinary moments. The sound of running water made her flinch, the reflection in the sink startled her. She felt like she was living inside a storm only she could hear. Her coworkers chatted around her, unaware of the battle inside her chest. Her hands shook slightly as she typed, the past pressing against her ribs. At lunch, she couldn't eat. Her stomach knotted with old fear resurfacing. She walked outside instead, letting the humid Miami air cling to her skin. The sky was cloudless, painfully bright, but she felt trapped in shadows. Every step felt heavy, anchored by memories she never processed. Her breath fluttered, unsteady as her heartbeat. She reached a bench near a small fountain where water spilled over stone edges. The sound made her freeze, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She closed her eyes tightly, steadying her breathing like someone learning it anew. The fear wasn't just about drowning, it was about everything she lost afterward. Safety, confidence, voice, possibility. For the first time she saw how deeply the trauma had shaped her life, how many choices she had made out of fear, not desire. How many dreams she had abandoned because the world felt unsafe. It broke something inside her to admit it, yet also freed something. Truth, even painful, felt like cleaner air in her lungs. That evening she stood at her window, watching the distant horizon glow orange. A part of her longed to drive to the beach again, though the idea terrified her. The conflict churned within her, fear and longing, past and future. She didn't know which would win, only that both were alive and loud. And the silence she once lived in no longer felt like a home she could return to. 2 days later, she found herself driving toward the coast without planning to. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, but she didn't turn back. The urge felt instinctual, like something inside her pulling her forward. When she reached the beach, the sight of the horizon made her knees weaken, but she kept walking, drawn as much by fear as by desire. The class was gathering again, colorful swim caps bobbing like small lanterns. Laura stopped several feet away, unsure if she was witnessing or intruding. Her heart thudded painfully, but her feet refused to retreat. The instructor noticed her, his expression warm and steady. He walked toward her with the calm of someone who understood fragile edges. "You thinking about joining us?" he asked gently, his voice carrying over the surf. She opened her mouth, but the words caught, tangled with fear and shame. All she could do was shake her head softly, her breath uneven. He nodded, not pushing, as if he knew silence better than anyone. "Then maybe just stay. Sometimes that's the first step." His kindness cracked something open in her, a faint warmth amid the panic. She watched the class enter the water, each movement deliberate and trusting. The ocean looked calmer today, its surface a soft ripple of silver and blue. A breeze touched her arms, cool enough to steady her slightly. But the fear remained, buzzing beneath her skin like electricity. Daniel returned to the group, giving her space without withdrawing support. She admired that, without knowing exactly why. Something about the moment felt both overwhelming and deeply right. Her breathing slowed as she let herself simply watch, without expectation. This small permission felt like a fragile victory. Minutes passed, the world softening as she stayed rooted in the sand. The class laughed, stumbled, tried again, their humanity strangely comforting. No perfection, No perception, no pressure, just effort and presence. She wondered when she had last allowed herself both. Her throat tightened with a mixture of grief and longing. As the class ended, Daniel glanced back at her and offered a small nod. Not an invitation, not a challenge, just acknowledgement. It warmed her in a place she thought had gone numb long ago. She turned to leave, her steps slow, her heart strangely full. And though she hadn't touched the water, something inside her had shifted. The next morning, Laura woke with a heaviness she couldn't ignore. A mix of fear and possibility pressed behind her ribs, urging her forward. She got dressed slowly, as if each movement required permission. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her keys, but she didn't stop. By the time she reached the beach, her breath was already uneven. The water shimmered beneath early sunlight, calm and inviting in a way that terrified her. She walked toward the shoreline with measured steps, her pulse loud in her ears. People passed by laughing, unaware of the battle happening inside her chest. Her feet sank into warm sand, grounding her in the present moment. The scent of salt wrapped around her like an old memory returning home. She stopped just a few feet from the water, watching small waves curl toward her. Each one whispered its own rhythm, soft, persistent, unafraid of her fear. Her breath came shallow, her body tense, her mind layering past onto present. She felt 17 again, helpless beneath a storm she couldn't outrun. But this time, she wasn't underwater, she was standing. With trembling resolve, she took one step closer until the tide touched her toes. The shock was immediate, cold spreading up through her legs like lightning. She gasped, gripping her arms around herself, fighting the instinct to flee. Her eyes stung with sudden tears she didn't understand at first. Then she realized they were tears of memory, not fear alone. The water receded, then returned, lapping gently, as if testing her boundaries. Each touch sent waves inside her, stirring grief, long buried. But beneath the grief, something warm flickered with quiet bravery. She let the water reach her feet again, her breath trembling but steadying. It wasn't victory, but it was movement. The wind brushed against her skin, carrying the sound of distant laughter. She closed her eyes, letting the tide wash over her ankles once more. This time she didn't pull back, though her body shook from the effort. Her fear was still there, sharp and alive, but no longer in control. For the first time, she felt the tiniest fragment of power return. When she opened her eyes, the world looked slightly different, brighter, steadier. The ocean no longer felt like an enemy, but like a story waiting to be rewritten. Her heart beat fast, but with something more than panic, something like hope. She stepped back from the water, not in retreat, but in recognition. Something had begun inside her, and she knew it would not stop now. Laura stood at the edge of the sand, fingers twisting the strap of a borrowed swimsuit. The morning light painted the water in soft blues and silvers, deceptively peaceful. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if others could hear it over the waves. Daniel spotted her and lifted a hand, his smile warm, not surprised at all. In that small gesture, she felt seen, and it scared her almost as much as the ocean. "Good to see you back," he said, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. She swallowed, words stuck somewhere between apology and explanation, offering neither. "I thought, maybe I could try," she managed, her voice thin but honest. Daniel nodded, as if this decision were the most natural thing in the world. "We go slow here. The water waits. It doesn't rush anyone." The other students greeted her with easy smiles, introducing themselves without pressure. There was Maria, who feared deep water after a childhood incident in a lake. Evelyn, who had never learned to swim because life always came first. A quiet man named Joel, recovering from a near drowning only a year before. Their stories brushed against hers like gentle waves, familiar in their hidden pain. Daniel led them to the shallows, where the water barely reached their knees. He explained the basics of breathing, of trusting their own bodies to float. Laura listened, but her attention pulsed between his words and the water's touch. Her mind replayed old Tara, yet her feet stayed rooted instead of fleeing. She realized that in itself was already a new kind of courage. "Let's start with just leaning back," Daniel said, his voice steady and patient. He demonstrated, his body relaxed, ears dipping beneath the surface, face open to sky. The ease of it felt unreachable, like some language she had forgotten long ago. When it was her turn, fear surged so sharply she almost stepped away. But Daniel's eyes met hers, grounding her with quiet certainty. "Don't fight the water," he murmured, standing nearby without touching her. Let it hold you. It knows how. The idea sounded impossible, yet strangely beautiful. Laura inhaled shakily, letting her shoulders loosen one hesitant inch. Slowly, she leaned back, every muscle screaming, but moving anyway. For one brief, fragile moment, the water lifted her, cradling her weight. She felt the world soften, sounds muffled, sky widening above her. It was not perfect, not steady. She flinched, feet touching bottom too quickly. But in that fleeting second, she had floated, and she knew it. As she stood again, breath trembling, a small, undeniable victory glowed inside her. That night, the ocean followed her home, not as terror, but as echo. She lay in bed replaying the moment her body had trusted the water. It had been only a heartbeat, a fragile sliver of time, but it mattered. Her chest swelled with a feeling she struggled to name: pride, maybe, or possibility. Alongside it, fear still lurked, but no longer alone. Over the next week, she returned to the beach again and again. Each lesson peeled back another layer of resistance she had built over decades. She learned how to move her arms calmly, how to exhale beneath the surface. Sometimes she shook so hard she thought she might shatter, yet each time, she stepped into the water anyway. Inside, the shifts were bigger than the strokes, Daniel taught her. She noticed how often she apologized for asking questions, for hesitating, for existing, how reflexively she shrank when someone spoke louder than her. The pattern looked so obvious beside the waves that refused to shrink for anyone. In the water, she could no longer hide how small she had made herself. One afternoon she misjudged a breath and swallowed a mouthful of salty water. Panic surged, memories flashing like lightning, her body convinced she was drowning again. She grabbed for Daniel's arm, fingers digging in harder than she meant. He steadied her with both hands, his gaze firm but gentle. "Look at me," he said quietly, anchoring her to the present. "You're here. You're safe. Your feet can touch the ground." She forced herself to feel the sand beneath her trembling toes. The difference between then and now hit her with startling clarity. At 17, no one had known what she carried afterward. At 50, she was finally letting someone see it. Later, sitting alone in her car, she stared at her shaking hands. The old instinct to run, to quit before failing, rose like a rip current. But another feeling rose beside it, stubborn, soft, almost defiant. She was tired of letting fear make every decision in her life. She wanted, desperately, to choose something else this time. Driving home, the city lights blurred slightly through tears she didn't wipe away. She felt fragile, cracked open, but oddly more alive than she had in years. Inside her, waves of emotion crashed and receded, messy and uncontrollable. Yet beneath them, a deeper tide was forming, one that moved toward healing. She didn't know the destination, but she knew she would keep showing up. As weeks passed, the other swimmers became more than faces in bright swim caps. They became mirrors, each reflecting a piece of Laura's hidden story. On a warm Saturday, they lingered after class, sitting in a loose circle on the sand. Someone brought coffee, someone else muffins, the ordinary kindness softening the shoreline. The conversation drifted naturally from small talk into quiet confessions. Maria spoke first, her voice carrying both shame and courage. "I avoided lakes for 35 years, she said, picking at the edge of her cup. "Everyone thought it was silly. They didn't know what happened when I was 10. As she shared, Laura felt her own chest tighten in recognition. Pain, she realized, changes shape, but its weight is strangely familiar. Evelyn laughed a little too loudly before admitting she had always put herself last. Kids, husband, parents, job. I ran out of room for me. Her smile wobbled as she added, 50 came, and I realized I didn't know myself. The group fell silent for a moment, each processing their own reflection in her words. Laura felt a sudden rush of tenderness for this stranger, who felt so much like her. When it was Laura's turn, her throat tightened around the truth. She could have kept it vague, mentioned only fear of deep water. Instead, the full story pushed against her ribs, demanding air. With a shaky breath, she let it out, the near drowning, the terror, the decades of avoidance. Her voice shook, but it did not break. No one laughed, dismissed, or minimized her experience. Instead, they nodded, eyes soft, as if welcoming her into some invisible circle. Daniel listened in silence, hands loosely clasped, respect written in his stillness. For the first time, Laura felt the weight of her story, held by others. It felt like someone was helping her carry a suitcase she'd dragged alone for years. Afterward, As the group slowly dispersed, Evelyn walked beside her for a while. "You know," Evelyn said, nudging her gently with a shoulder, "I think it's brave, starting something like this at our age." Laura's instinct was to deflect, to downplay, to shrug it off. Instead, she let the words land, warm and unfamiliar. That evening, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and paused. For years she had glanced quickly, focusing on flaws, avoiding direct eye contact. Now she looked longer, seeing not just lines and tiredness, but something new. There was fear, yes, but also a steadiness growing quietly beneath it. For the first time, she whispered to her reflection, "I'm proud of you," and meant it. The morning started deceptively calm, with only thin clouds drifting above the water. Laura arrived at the beach early, feeling a rare lightness in her chest. She had slept well, dreamed not of drowning, but of floating under a wide sky. As class began, a cool wind picked up, ruffling the surface of the sea. Daniel glanced at the horizon, his expression quietly assessing. "We'll stay in the shallows today," he announced, voice steady but attentive. "The water's changing, so we listen and respect it." Laura felt a flicker of unease as small waves began to slap more sharply at her legs. The sound of the surf grew louder, like a memory raising its voice. Still, she followed the group into the water, trusting his judgment. At first, it was manageable, the waves playful, the movement challenging but not overwhelming. They practiced breathing in rhythm with the swells, learning to move with, not against. Then a larger wave rolled in unexpectedly, splashing higher than before. Water rushed up Laura's chest, over her shoulders, brushing against her mouth. In an instant, panic detonated, bright and blinding. Her breath vanished, stolen by the ghost of old terror surging through her body. The sky seemed to tilt, the horizon spinning, sound collapsing into a roar. She gasped, swallowing salty water, convinced she was back in that teenage nightmare. Hands reached toward her, but her mind only saw herself sinking again. Her muscles locked, frozen between fight and flight. "Laura." Daniel's voice cut through the noise like a rope thrown across darkness. He moved beside her, not grabbing, but anchoring with his presence. "Feel your feet," he said, firm but calm. "Press them into the sand." She forced her awareness downward, searching for something solid beneath chaos. Slowly, the sensation of ground returned, faint but real. The storm inside her lasted longer than the roughest wave. Even after the water settled a little, her breathing lagged, jagged and shallow. Daniel signaled to the others to move closer to shore, giving her space without spectacle. "You're okay," he repeated softly, staying by her side as the panic receded. "It's not failure to be afraid. It's courage to come back from it." After class, she sat alone on the sand, wrapped in a towel that couldn't warm her. The urge to quit pressed hard, whispering that she was too broken, too late. Tears slipped down her cheeks, salt mixing with salt, ocean on skin. Yet beneath the humiliation, something stubborn refused to surrender completely. She had survived both the memory and the moment, and that meant something. The next time she came to class, doubt clung to her like wet clothes. Every step toward the water felt heavier than the last. Still, she showed up, which already felt like defiance against her old patterns. Daniel greeted her with no mention of the storm day, only a warm nod. His quiet acceptance soothed the shame still lingering in her chest. "Today is about choice," he told the group, voice carrying easily over the gentle waves. "You decide how far you go, and that choice is an act of strength." They practiced floating again, then simple strokes near the surface. Laura's movements were cautious, but more controlled than before. Fear still hummed beneath her skin, but not as loudly. Midway through the class, Daniel suggested a new exercise. "For anyone who wants," he said, "we'll try dipping fully under just for a second." The idea made Laura's stomach twist, memories flaring with sharp clarity. Yet another part of her leaned forward, curious despite the terror. This was the moment she had been avoiding all her life. He demonstrated first, taking a deep breath and sliding beneath the surface. He stayed only a heartbeat before rising again, calm and unhurried. "It's not about time," he reminded them. "It's about trust in yourself." In the water, around her, some classmates went under and came up laughing nervously. Laura watched, pulse racing, feeling the choice grow heavier in her hands. When Daniel's eyes met hers, he didn't push, only offered possibility. "If today isn't your day, that's okay," he said quietly. "But if it is, I'm here." She stood in chest-deep water, feeling the waves tap gently against her. Her heart pounded so hard she wondered if it might break through her ribs. She realized that more than the water, she feared disappointing herself again. Laura took one slow breath, then another, grounding herself in the present. She felt the air fill her lungs, the water cradle her body, the sky watching above. With a trembling exhale, she bent her knees and let herself sink. For a brief, suspended moment, everything went quiet. No voices, no memories, just blue. Then she pushed up, breaking the surface with a gasp that tasted like freedom. The world rushed back in a chorus of sounds, light, and the thud of her heartbeat. She realized she was standing, not drowning, fully here and fully alive. Daniel's smile was small but proud, mirrored by the warmth in her classmates' eyes. Tears blurred the shoreline as laughter bubbled unexpectedly from her chest. It had been only a small dive, but for Laura, it felt like the beginning of a new life. That night, Laura sat alone in her living room, wrapped in a quiet she no longer feared. The small dive replayed in her mind like a scene from someone else's life, someone braver. But as the pride settled, something deeper stirred, tugging at old shadows. She felt the weight of a truth she had carried for decades pressing upward. It was time, she realized, to face the memory fully, not in fragments. She closed her eyes and let the past rise without fighting it back. 17-year-old Laura appeared vividly, trembling in a churning Atlantic tide. She remembered the panic, the water above her face, the desperate reach for air. But beneath that, another memory surfaced, the argument she'd had just before. Her friend had dared her to swim further than she knew she could. She had said yes, not because she felt strong, but because she feared seeming weak. The realization hit her now with painful clarity, tightening her chest. She had nearly drowned, trying to prove something she didn't need to prove. And afterward, shame had sealed her silence tighter than fear ever could. She had carried that shame like armor, heavy and suffocating. Laura placed her hand over her heart, feeling it pulse steadily beneath her palm. She whispered the truth she'd never dared to voice. I was scared, and I didn't have to be. The words shook her, loosening a knot she had held for 33 years. Tears slipped down her face, soft, quiet tears, not of fear but release. For the first time, her past felt like something she could walk through, not run from. At the next lesson, Daniel immediately sensed something different in her. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes clearer, her breaths deeper. When she stepped into the water, it felt like stepping into a story she finally owned. She told Daniel the full truth, voice trembling but steady enough. He nodded with a quiet respect that made her feel safe in her vulnerability. Shame is heavier than fear, he said softly. You've been carrying both. His words landed gently but deeply, echoing in the hollow places inside her. She felt both fragile and strong, the two no longer contradictions. The water around her rippled as if acknowledging the shift within her. She inhaled slowly, letting its rhythm steady her pulse. That night she sat by her open window, listening to distant waves. The sound no longer triggered panic, it carried understanding. She felt like she had finally met her younger self with compassion instead of judgment. The past still ached, but it no longer defined the edges of her life. And she knew something important: healing had truly begun. A week later, Daniel introduced a new challenge to the group. He pointed to a bright orange buoy, not far from shore, bobbing in gentle rhythm. Optional, he emphasized, but it's a powerful milestone if you choose it. Laura felt her stomach twist, excitement and dread colliding in her chest. The distance looked both small and impossibly large. Her classmates exchanged nervous glances, murmuring quiet encouragement to one another. The sun glinted off the water, painting shifting paths of light toward the buoy. Laura stared at it, imagining her younger self frozen halfway to safety. She inhaled slowly, letting the present moment anchor her. This was not then. She was not the same girl. Daniel approached her with a softness that never felt intrusive. You don't have to prove anything, he reminded her. Just choose what feels true today. She nodded, absorbing the weight and freedom of his words. For a long moment, she stood there, listening to her heartbeat. Then she whispered, almost to herself, I want to try. They practiced basic strokes first, strengthening form, calming nerves. Every kick stirred sediment from old fears, but also built new confidence. The group encouraged each other, their voices blending with the waves. Laura felt held by a collective courage larger than her own. For once, she didn't feel alone in the vastness of the water. When it was time, she stood at the starting point. chest deep in the sea. The buoy bobbed patiently, an unmoving witness to her war and her becoming. Her breath quivered, but her resolve no longer faltered. Daniel swam beside her, not leading or pushing, just being there. She took one more breath, fuller than any before. Then she began the first strokes, careful, deliberate, controlled. The water lifted and guided her, no longer an enemy but a partner. Halfway there, fear flickered, but she kept her focus on the rhythm of movement. Daniel's presence remained steady, a quiet reassurance at her side. Stroke by stroke, she approached the buoy that once felt unreachable. When her fingers finally touched the cool surface of the buoy, she froze. A rush of heat surged through her body, shock, relief, disbelief, triumph. She pressed her forehead gently against it, letting tears mix with salt water. She had crossed not just distance, but the invisible boundary of her old life, and she knew she would never be the same. The next class arrived with a sense of quiet anticipation. The buoy crossing had changed the group, but it had transformed Laura. Still, one challenge remained, the deeper confrontation she had avoided. Daniel suggested a longer, more fluid swim along the shoreline. Not far, not deep, but steady enough to test endurance and fear. Laura's pulse quickened the moment he explained the plan. The distance wasn't the issue, it was the symbolism. Moving forward without stopping, without touching ground, felt intimate and terrifying. It mirrored all the years she had stopped herself before reaching anything. She felt the familiar tension return, but differently, now less control, more awareness. As they entered the water, the world felt wider than usual. Waves rolled in gentle curves, each one whispering movement and surrender. Laura steadied her breathing, remembering the trust she had begun to cultivate. "Stay with the rhythm," Daniel said, swimming beside her. Not perfect, just present. The first stretch felt manageable, her strokes calm and even, but soon the old fear crept in, tightening her breath, clouding her focus. Her mind flashed with images of her teenage self sinking, helpless and unseen. Her muscles stiffened, her rhythm faltered, her chest burned with panic. She wanted to stop, to stand, to escape, but Daniel's voice broke through the storm inside her. "Laura, look at me." She turned her head just enough to meet his steady gaze. "You're not alone this time. Stay here with me, with now." The words struck her deeply, anchoring her to the present moment. She inhaled shakily, letting the truth settle. She was safe, supported, capable. The panic didn't vanish, but it loosened, giving her room to breathe. She found her rhythm again, smaller but steadier than before. Each stroke became a declaration, a reclaiming of something once lost. Slowly, she felt strength rise where fear had lived for decades. When they reached the final marker, she stopped, breathless but triumphant. Her arms ached, her heart raced, her eyes shimmered with tears. She had confronted the deepest layer of her fear and survived it. Daniel smiled softly, pride radiating with quiet sincerity, and in that moment, the ocean felt like a place she finally belonged. The day after the long swim, Laura returned to the beach alone, not for class, not for instruction, just to meet the water on her own terms. The morning air was cool, carrying a faint scent of seaweed and sun. She walked slowly, savoring each step as if approaching a sacred place. Her body felt lighter, her breath more her own. She waded in, up to her waist, the water cooled against her warm skin. There was no trembling now, only a soft awareness of old echoes. She took a deep breath and floated, ears sinking beneath the surface. The world above softened into a distant hum, the sky framing her vision. For the first time, she felt held without fear. Memories rose again, but gently this time, like pages turning, not waves crashing. She saw her younger self clearly, terrified and alone, but no longer blamed her. Compassion washed through her, deeper than the water beneath her body. She understood now how long she had been grieving that girl, and how long that girl had waited for someone to save her. Laura lowered herself fully under the water, calm and deliberate. She stayed longer than she ever had before, feeling the quiet cradle her. The silence was no longer dangerous, it was peace, deep and overflowing. When she emerged, sunlight broke across her face like a blessing. She laughed softly, surprised by the sound of her own joy. She swam a short distance on her own, steady and unhurried. Her arms cut through the water with a grace she never imagined she'd feel again. Every movement felt like reclaiming a piece of her life, one stroke at a time. There was no audience, no validation, only her, and the sea, and that was more than enough. On the sand, she wrapped herself in a towel and watched the tide shift. She felt gratitude swelling in her chest, messy, full, overwhelming, for Daniel, for her classmates, for the stranger inside herself who refused to quit. She realized she had crossed more than the buoy and the shoreline. She had crossed the threshold into the rest of her life. As she stood to leave, a gentle wave brushed her ankles in farewell. It felt like acknowledgement, a quiet nod from something larger than fear. She whispered thank you to the water, voice carried softly by the wind. Her heart felt open in a way she had never known at any age, and she walked away knowing she would always return, not to fight, but to belong. Weeks later, Laura found herself drawn back to the beach with a new purpose. She wasn't there for a lesson. She was there to help others begin theirs. Daniel welcomed her with a knowing smile, handing her a spare clipboard. "You're good with people who are scared," he said simply. The words filled her with warmth, expanding a space inside her she hadn't known existed. She watched newcomers step hesitantly toward the water, older women, anxious men, timid teens. She saw in each of them the trembling she once lived with every day. Her heart swelled with empathy, not pity, recognizing the courage in their fear. She approached gently, offering encouragement, presence, and calm breath. Her voice carried steadiness she had earned stroke by stroke. One woman froze at the shoreline, tears welling as memories overtook her. Laura walked to her side, remembering that very battle in her own bones. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to go in today. Just breathe here." The woman nodded, relief breaking across her tense expression. Laura realized healing could echo outward, touching lives she hadn't met before. As the sun climbed higher, the class moved through exercises with growing confidence. Laura demonstrated floating, her body relaxed in a way once unimaginable. Students watched, inspired not by perfection but by proof of transformation. She felt her heart lift each time someone tried something new. The water felt alive with shared bravery. After class, Daniel walked beside her along the shoreline. "You've changed the energy here," he said, his tone warm and sincere. She smiled, unsure how to hold the weight of those words. "I just know what it feels like to be scared," she replied softly, "and what it feels like to come back anyway." That evening, Laura sat on her balcony overlooking Miami's shimmering skyline. The city pulsed with life, but for the first time, she felt part of it again. Her heart carried no heavy armor, only a quiet strength shaped by the sea. She had traded silence for presence, fear for movement, shame for truth. And in that exchange, she had rediscovered herself. The ocean was no longer a wound, it was a companion, a teacher, a home. Laura closed her eyes, imagining the tide rolling in and out in steady rhythm. She felt alive, purposeful, and open to whatever came next. A new chapter had begun, one she had written with courage and water, and she knew, with deep certainty, that it was never too late to start again.